And if I can also take a moment to go back to our guests, if they are still with us. We are told about Gaurav Sansanwal and Akshat Singh from CSIS and Professor Indranil Basure from the University of Memphis, Tennessee, for their comments, brief comments to begin with on the big takeaways from the joint press statements and the Q&A with President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. If I can start with you, Professor Ray, your thoughts very quickly, if you will, about your takeaways from that press availability.
So I have three important things that
Sure.
I think is the most important that we got to understand. One is increased defense cooperation. Mr. Trump clearly said that he's going to possibly give F-35 to India, and that's a big thing. India is at a point that it's struggling to have in its armamentarium a stealth fighter to match China. Though there's a lot of questions about the real capability of China's stealth fighter. But having said that, F-35 for India would certainly be a game changer. That's one big thing. In the same vein, he said he's willing and he knows there's been dirty skirmish between India and China. If he can help, he would like to take part. Obviously, this is the salami taking attitude of China trying to cut into other property. The only country in the world which has fight with each and every neighbor that it has, each and every neighbor. There's not even a single neighbor of China with which it doesn't have territorial dispute. So that's one important thing, I think. So defense cooperation and understanding China. Second important thing is very important that I think is India has been bled in most since its independence by Pakistan and its Islamic jihad. And though it's basically a nation, but it has been exporting jihad all through. That I think will get some sort of a break. The fact that the mastermind of Bombay attack planned and orchestrated by Pakistan, where hundreds of Indians with absolutely no fault of theirs was killed. That person is going, Abu Rahman is going back to India. Moreover, I think this is a warning. If you look carefully, even in his first term and this term, Trump has got a no-nonsense attitude towards Islamic jihad. And a country that exhibits Islamic jihad as its foreign policy, like India's neighbor, I think it's time that things might actually change in that focus. Third, I think another important concept came, as you heard about, and Mr. Modi's reaction was very appropriate. He clearly made it clear that if a real Indian citizen is an illegal alien in America, India is more than willing to take it back. And that's a very rational concept. But don't forget, there are hundreds and thousands of illegal immigrants in India too. And some of them are part and parcel of IS or other Islamic jihad sleeper organization. So I think this creates a completely new paradigm that India also has the right to send these people who are illegal, not only illegal immigrants, many of them, just like what America did, sent people with criminal backgrounds, not necessarily from India, but from Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, back. So India has also the right to send back these people to their country because they have been a sort of a cancer to India's development. They added to the crime in cities like Delhi, in Calcutta. So I think these are the three most important things that I would take away from the meeting of these two great leaders.
Fair enough. Professor Ray highlighting the Trump announcement of giving India the F-35 stealth aircraft and also batting for more military sales to India, and also talking about Trump's offer to possibly help India combat or counter the Chinese salami slicing tactics along the unresolved boundary, among other things. A quick comment from you as well, Mr. Singh, before we let you go. I'm told you're pressed for time, so a very quick comment from you about the important takeaways from your perspective, your vantage from the joint press statement by President Trump and Prime Minister Modi.
Thank you, Mesh. So very momentous press conference. Usually when we have press conferences ahead of the fact sheet or the joint statement released, we don't really expect so much substance. And that has been the case for previous US-India meetings as well. But I believe that this press conference shows that this meeting kicked things off right off the bat. One thing that I'd like to highlight, which has been a very important tenet of the US-India partnership, perhaps the most momentous agreement over the past 20 years, which is the US-India civil nuclear deal of 2008. Now, we know that the US-India civil nuclear deal was signed in 2008, and then in 2010, the civil nuclear liability bill was brought in the parliament, and the clause about limited supplier liability, so Section 17B of the civil nuclear liability bill was a stickler because it essentially extended liability to suppliers of nuclear material rather than just operators. Now, this essentially stopped American companies from participating in the Indian civil nuclear ecosystem, which impeded the growth of nuclear energy in India. What President Trump and Prime Minister Modi mentioned, which is cooperation on civil nuclear arrangement and addressing liability issue, clearly reflects that there is going to be some change in the Indian law, where the Indian civil nuclear liability law will be brought closer to international standards. It'll be brought closer to international conventions where liability is limited to operators and not suppliers. Now, we need to understand that in the context of another thing that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi said, which is further cooperation on critical minerals, especially rare earths. Just in January, when the National Security Advisor visited India, he announced that 3 Indian firms are going to be removed from the US sanctioned list. And the 3 firms were the Indira Gandhi Atomic Research Center, the Baba Atomic Research Center, and Indian Rare Earths Limited, the company which is responsible for mining thorium and rare earths in India and creating a strategic stockpile. Additionally, in Indian companies such as L&T as well as NTPC are already collaborating with prominent US firms such as Clean Core Thorium on developing a thorium-based nuclear energy ecosystem. My summary here would be that we should expect some interesting things to follow over the next few months on nuclear power cooperation between US and India, on civil nuclear cooperation, and especially on rare earth elements.
Fair enough. On that note, Mr. Akshat Singh, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Right, so we still have our other guests and soon we'll be joined by my colleague, correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh from Washington, D.C. May I go to now Mr. Gaurav Sansanwal for his take on the highlights or takeaways from that Modi-Trump joint press conference. Would you say, Mr. Sansanwal, that trade and defense was one of the big, the key highlights from that press availability?
There, but when we look at the high level, I think there are 2 major takeaways.
Okay.
One, as you rightly described, trade and defense are both a reflection of the fact that on the economic and commercial side, we are seeing either a continuation of what was happening earlier between the 2 countries, or we are actually seeing an expansion. And civil nuclear energy is an example of that. Artificial intelligence, high-tech, space, IMECC, opening of more consulates, I2U2. So the entire architecture of the relationship on the economic and commercial side, we are actually, this gives us hope that there is continuity there. The only red flag, though, to note is that while the agreement was mentioned, a trade agreement of some kind was mentioned, we did not get much details on what that was going to look like. And on the contrary, we actually heard pretty tough rhetoric on tariffs and reciprocal tariffs, especially. So for any kind of a meeting of minds to take place for an agreement, the 2 sides are actually going to have to sit down and iron out, and somebody's going to lose somewhere for the other side to gain. So we are going to have to see how much of this optimism around an agreement lives up, whether it matches the hype or not. But on everything else, yes, we're seeing a lot of continuity. The only final thing I'll say is on the strategic side, where we are seeing some kind of a realignment obviously in the US foreign policy, as President Trump had in fact campaigned during his election. And India's role in that is looking like the story here, because on Ukraine we saw that that India, which has always had appetite for more of a role in global affairs, is going to has a view which is similar to that of President Trump. So I think that's one good thing. The red flag for me on the strategic side, though, is going to be how the border, the India-China border, is going to be handled. Because while previously we've seen intelligence cooperation with the US on that front, what President Trump today seemed to suggest was some kind of if you need my help, which could mean anything from mediation to any tangible kind of an offer. So you have to see how that shapes up. We know that in the past with our neighbors, India has not always been open to third countries playing a role actively in sort of resolving disputes. But otherwise, at a strategic level, India would feel included in some of the global affairs that President Trump is prioritizing, and that's a big story for me. And on the commercial side, lots of momentum continuing, but chances of an agreement or what that's going to look like, it's not all that much clear right now. I think we got to wait for the ink to dry and for us to then assess if what's been promised is achievable or not. But over to you, Ramesh.
Fair enough. Trump is known to make off-the-cuff remarks, but many dismiss some of those remarks, at their own peril, so to speak, because Trump is known to have given it a thought and made measured statements, as in the case, for instance, on the Gaza conflict, or even now the latest remarks on resolving the India-China boundary dispute. So one has to wait and watch as to how this pans out. But I am interested also in clubbing what he said with what a US official said before the talks actually began. And I remember asking one of our guests earlier on the show, where a US official is quoted as saying that the US expects continued cooperation with India on potential Chinese security issues. And that, to my mind, perfectly dovetails with what Trump had to say when he said, if I can help, I'll be more than happy to help resolve the outstanding differences between India and China. Especially, he described what is happening at the boundary as vicious skirmishes, which have been happening repeatedly in the last several years and decades. So it's something to watch out for. I'll come back to that in just a bit. Let me go across to my colleague Shubhendu, who is standing by in Washington, D.C. Shubhendu, your first thoughts on the big takeaways from that joint press statement. What did you make of the remarks made by Prime Minister Modi and his host, President Donald Trump?
Right, Ramesh, it did appear like a marathon negotiation, host of areas Indeed. Where the leaders appear to have discussed and negotiated everything from immediate trade relations to Russia, Ukraine, mega ambitious trade routes as well, spanning from India to the United States. Well, the very first one, given that there was so much speculation and talks about the trade and the tariff issue, President Trump, they're speaking, really not mincing any words about the manner in which he would like that trade imbalance, is what he calls the deficit against America and the India-US trade balance. He would like that to be fixed, and the way it is going to be done is more energy exports that US plans to do to India. India would also look to diversify. So we also have to see what does appear from a distance like a push to sell American energy to India. We have to see the manner in which it could be a cooperation and an important agreement for both the countries. India would also get an opportunity to diversify its energy basket, which for now really looks to West Asia and Russia. At the moment, American oil and gas could be an important source there. President Trump says that he intends to have that as a way to balance the trade deficit. At the same time, there is also talks about the sale of advanced defense equipment, including F-35 fighter jet to India. Now, the important important part therein is what Prime Minister Modi said, and that's where we see it may have been a short but a very intense negotiation session, because Prime Minister also making India's priority very clear, that as there is a Make America Great Again, there is also the idea of Make India Great Again, the idea of making India a developed country by 2047. And how that happens is by having a solid manufacturing base. And therefore, while on the one hand there is a talk about sale of American defense equipments, advanced defense equipments to India, there is also there appears to be an understanding of co-production, something that initially experts were apprehensive about whether America would agree. They would simply want to sell and make money out of it. But here India seems to have put across its point very strongly, that for that sort of an exchange, trade of defense equipment to happen, co-production has to happen in partnership with India. Apart from that, we also see talks about cooperation in the area of AI and other advanced technology, and that's an important positive. Both the countries appears to be on the same front. The extradition of Tahabur Rana, the stand that both the country have been traditionally taking against terrorism, that there we see a clear continuity, and both countries are speaking in clear terms about the manner to fight that challenge. There was also much spoken about, interestingly, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and again, both countries in their own ways, both the leaders speaking about the manner in which they are pushing for peace. On the China question too, President Donald Trump's intervention does leave some room to talk about what kind of support America intends to provide in the manner in which India-China dynamics have played out in the recent past. His rhetoric does come across more of a business person looking to make a deal, and therefore not so much as a strategic adversary, as a business adversary is how he appeared to be referring to China. So some of the key takeaways there, Ramesh, were lots to really go through, and we can take it up one by one.
Indeed, why not? Shubhendu, do stay on. I'll also ask our guests to stay on. I'll come back to all of you momentarily. But let me, like Shubhendu said, recap for the benefit of viewers tuning in about the big takeaways